Welcome to Brands on Tap, the podcast where we discuss all things brand related.
So whether you're a business owner, industry expert, or simply interested, this podcast is for you.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Brands on Tap. This week we're going to be covering all things branding. So if we start with asking you, Paul, what do we mean when we say branding?
Well, branding is it's such a broad subject, and I think might be better off starting with what it isn't. A lot of people think that branding is the logo, and although the logo is part of the overall, the collateral really is one element of it. So yeah, the logo isn't necessarily like a logo can be like a motif, or it can be a symbol, it can be an avatar or an icon, but that's just one element of it. So essentially, brand is what your target audience have a gut feel about you. It's not what you say it is.
Yeah.
Although, yeah, I guess what you can do, I mean, in order to create a brand is like you need to create the story that you want your target audience to know about you, so they believe in your product, your company ethos.
Sure.
And, you know, we as a creative agency, branding agency, we create that story for our clients, right? So, yeah, we kind of create everything. Like it starts like it could be the logo, it could be the name of the company.
Yeah.
And it's also the collateral, it's the tone of voice, it's the messaging,
Yeah.
it's the style of imagery, and the narrative as well. So by creating collateral, including the logo design, including all those other elements, you are, and especially the narrative and how you talk to people, that creates like a tone of voice that you want to portray about your business or your product or both.
Absolutely.
And so then your target audience then buy into that messaging and yeah, just how you're talking to the target audience. And if it aligns to their way of thinking and they think, yeah, this is a kind of company that I believe in.
Yes.
And what it stands for. I love the style of imagery. I love just everything about that brand because of what they're putting out there, the way they're putting it out there, the even the style of the creative as well. And by doing that, you know, you're then creating a tribe, right? So they buy into, just everything that you stand for.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, that makes sense.
So that essentially is what a brand is. It's what, you know, your target audience think you are by their gut feel. And they can only get that by, you structuring your brand in such a way that is going to portray the kind of way that you want your target audience to believe in your brand. So as I say, it comes down to style of imagery, all the assets you put out there, even the types of social platforms you might be on, all the touch points basically, and it goes as deep as, like, especially in this era, it goes as deep as like how you align to other brands as well.
Yeah.
So if you're being seen, as I say, in this day and age, like to be sustainable.
Yeah, sustainable's huge, isn't it, at the moment?
Yeah. So and so people buy into that kind of culture, if you like.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's it in a rounded nutshell.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good summary, isn't it? And I think there's an element of expectations for brands these days, like sustainability. Like we've come in contact with a lot of B Corp businesses, and early on they were quite unusual and quite rare, and now it's almost people are questioning, why aren't you B Corp and what are your sustainability credentials?
Yeah.
And I think we're coming across that more with proposals we're doing, and dedicated sections in those proposals allocated to what's your value to the environment, what are you doing for the environment, and it puts that pressure on those brands to kind of conform to that. But I think you've hit the nail on the head with, I think, killing off the misconceptions of what branding is, which I think a lot of people think it's either just a logo or internally what they think their brand is. And I think that's the misconceptions from my side of what I think people misunderstand. When you've rightly said, it's the audience, it's not what you think your brand is, it's what other people think you are.
Exactly that. And there is, I mean, that sort of relates to like the perceptions, like you touched on. It's like we did some brand work years ago,
right,
for Darthaven Marina.
I remember, yeah.
And so they initially, all they wanted was, they contacted us, they wanted an advert, right?
Sure.
That's what we're going to do, create an ad. But on my first meeting with them, it's quite clear that this ad wasn't necessarily what they needed.
Okay.
And I think, again, that's what we do, as you know very well,
of course,
that sometimes we're tasked to do a certain thing. And then when we had a chat with a client, we might find that actually it may not be the right thing.
Yeah.
So we're quite honest about that.
Mm-hmm.
So we identified with this ad, with Darthaven in particular, that, trying to get the messaging correct, we felt that there's actually a step before that needed to be addressed.
Absolutely, yeah.
So knowing some boating friends of mine and other contacts that are in the boating world, we decided to conduct some research. So what we did was we contacted only about a dozen marine related people to find out the perceptions of Darthaven Marina. Right?
Yeah.
And this is after our initial meeting with Darthaven, and they had very set views that they were good value, customer service was spot on,
of course,
never any issues.
No, usual,
and numerous other things.
Yeah.
And so, we conducted our own research after that meeting, and we relayed to them in that meeting that we would go away and put together a proposal and find out a bit more information about their brand and, how they're perceived externally.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it didn't come as a complete shock.
Yeah.
So we did that. We conducted the research. We sat with them after creating the proposal.
Sure.
And it was quite clear that the research that we conducted, that the perception was that they weren't great value.
No.
They're seen as fairly expensive compared to other local competitors.
Interesting, yeah.
And also, customer service wise, they were good. But they weren't seen as like the best in the industry, especially locally.
Okay.
So that kind of led us then to, thinking that something needs to be addressed here. There's a disconnect between what the client's perception of their brand is, and the reality of what their target audience view them as. So this is where research, I think, is really important to a brand, that understanding, external perceptions as opposed to internal perceptions. And we all think that, we've got great brands and our business is doing amazing, our customer service is fantastic and all the rest of it.
No one likes to be told their brand is,
sometimes
wrong
that's just not the case. And, by addressing those insights, you can then make changes. But only, like in our case, only if like we're talking to a client and they're accepting of that change and they believe in the research. So anyway, we went down, had this meeting with them, and basically they were kind of blown away really with the information. They couldn't believe that that's how they were perceived externally, but
took it quite positively, I think, didn't they? They didn't take offence
to it.
But
I mean, you can tell they were shocked, because I think sometimes hearing the truth about a brand,
it's difficult,
and this is only a snapshot and may not be a true reflection of all their customers, because clearly not, otherwise they wouldn't be going still,
of course.
But they took it on board. They said, we believe that this research could genuinely help us. And they were willing for us to sort of take that on. And so what we decided to do then was address those issues. So from our perspective, creating collateral for, say, Darthaven in this instance, we were then able to address those certain elements of that feedback by one of the things we did was we said that the servicing side of their business really ought to become a separate entity. And the reason being is that we could then align all the messaging and tone of voice to people that are requiring servicing of their boats.
Yeah,
basically.
makes sense. Yeah.
So it's far more targeted, and it's not a generic, we're a marina and,
all
come and
things
moor
to
your
all
boat
people.
here and
Yeah.
you can also get it serviced.
Yeah.
It was much more specific. So we recommended that Darthaven Marina was one element and Darthaven Services was another.
Yeah.
So then the focus could then change for each area of the business.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
And, we did the same on the marina side so that we're focusing on the berth holders and, all the packages that came with that.
Yeah.
And that also tied in with the Darthaven Services as well, like, taking your boat out of the water come sort of September, October time and anti-fouling it and,
Sure.
servicing the boat ready for the next season kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we did that. They believed in it, which is great because some clients just don't.
No, and that makes it very difficult, doesn't it?
And it makes our job
Yeah.
10 times harder. But, we did that. And by doing that, they bought into the whole advice that we put forward.
Sure.
And it is totally transformed their business. The marina is consistently, fully booked.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a waiting list more often than not to get a mooring
amazing.
there. And the servicing side of things has really taken off as well.
Yeah.
And it's mainly because, as I say, we addressed what the perception was.
Absolutely.
And creating messaging and collateral that address those issues. In particular, like on the servicing side, we recommended that they started creating packages. So, and discounting some things if you collected some items together. So like boat servicing, for instance, they discounted that. So over time, they were then perceived as being actually good value because they managed to package together a few things. And so then they were seen as, good value, customer service because we'd highlighted that aspect.
Absolutely.
They trained all their staff.
Yeah.
Staff then were more courteous to customers, especially if the client was complaining about something, which doesn't happen too often, fortunately for Darthaven. But all things always go wrong with any business.
Of course they do, yeah.
And it's how you address them.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they learnt through that process is, not saying that the customer's always right, but certainly being able to address it in a very nice way, more friendly, personable manner. And so the reputation of, how they handle things
Absolutely,
and customer service went up. So they're now at a point where they're expanding their business.
Yeah.
So, that's just
Proof.
one, client that we've worked with that we've
Yeah,
helped.
one example, but it's proof how, as you say, you've gone around the sort of conformities of what people would assume branding is and actually addressed the core fundamentals, which is their audience, and found out what are they, the people that are buying from them, what are they finding difficult, what would they like to do better.
Yeah.
And on that note, you've touched on the fact, which I think is really important, with the fact of how you look after your audience and your clientele.
Yeah.
Because too often, you've only got to do 2-3 things wrong with your audience, and they will tell someone else and they'll tell someone else. And although you don't see that as your brand, ultimately it is your brand because it could get negative press. It could appear in the news. Apple, for example, they've got to be very careful. They do one thing wrong, it goes around the news. Suddenly the perception of their persona and how they treat customers is down the pan, and that really adversely affects them as a brand. And I think that's also forgotten about, is your brand is also how you treat your customers.
Yep.
So with what you've said, with Darthaven, I think that's an advocate of that, isn't it?
No, absolutely. I think, you're right. I mean, it's your staff are equally part of your brand.
Yes.
If they sing the same tune as you as a business, and this comes down to like the management as well. that whatever you're trying to portray as your brand and who you are and what you stand for needs to be relayed to the staff.
It does.
Because if they're singing a different tune,
Yeah.
and likewise we touched on Darthaven, and if, like, say, their customer service was shocking,
Yeah.
then yes, it harms the reputation of the brand.
Yeah, the whole brand, including everything they sell, and further afield than just the services.
Yeah.
And I think people forget that, because that is, as you say, that is crucial with building that personality and relationship up. You
Yeah.
are essentially creating a relationship with you and your customer.
Yeah.
Although certain brands don't see it that way, I think even the smallest of brands, that's happening.
Yeah, even one-man bands. I
Yeah.
mean, that touch point just needs to be everything that they deal with your company needs to be, it needs to be slick creatively as well, because that's the other thing, that if the strategy is there,
Yeah.
and the logo might be sound and the name of the business might be sound and all the rest of it, and your personality might be great.
Sure.
But then if you don't look professional enough, and the creative side of things, or your collateral looks like it's been done, in 5 minutes on Word or something, then that's not going to carry your business forward either. And it sets the wrong tone for the brand. And I think, again, that's quite often what gets missed. And I think the age now where you've got clients that can create a lot of collateral themselves,
Absolutely,
they
can.
haven't gone through that whole brand process.
No.
And what's important for their brand.
Agreed.
How they talk to their target audience. And I don't mean, just verbally when they're talking to them on the phone, but
No.
how they talk to them in their messaging on their collateral. And we've seen it where we've seen collateral go out, social media posts, for instance,
Sure
and
have.
it's gone through ChatGPT, for instance, and
Yeah.
there's loads of Americanisms, there's spelling errors, there's grammatical errors,
Yeah.
and that in itself, sets the wrong tone for that brand.
Absolutely.
So yes, okay, you might be saving some money by not going through a branding agency,
You aren't making any either.
or creative agency, or both, to create your collateral. But ultimately, what damage is that going to do to your brand, right? Because everything needs to be 100%.
Does.
And if it's not, like you say, it could be bad customer service, it could be a complaint, it could be, your logo quickly done in Word, or, grabbed straight off the internet. It could be any one of those things, using the wrong colours. Just layout wise, in designing collateral, if all those elements aren't tied in and it's 100%, then all that does is chink away at what that brand stands for, right?
Yeah, makes perfect sense.
And it can be catastrophic. Yes, okay, you might be saving some money, but if you've been using an agency in the past, for instance, and that agency might elevated your collateral to make it look amazing, it's telling the right story, it's the right messaging, and all your target audience are believing in you as a brand and like becoming part of your tribe, if you like, and proud to kind of talk about you and your brand and your business.
Sure.
If they suddenly find that, the creative has gone downhill, you swap your logo out for something just grabbed off the internet, everything you're writing just seems to be churned out on ChatGPT or similar, then all that's going to do is alienate or start to alienate the tribe that you've spent years and good money putting together.
Completely agree. Yeah.
So
I think it's the trust, isn't it? You're building up a trust relationship with somebody.
It is trust.
And there's initial touch points, and then there's ongoing touch points. So the initial touch point is them judging you based on how well polished is your logo.
Yeah.
How much time have you spent putting into the typography?
Yeah.
How important to you is it that your social media posts are consistent and that the messaging is consistent?
Yep.
And all those things, even if people don't necessarily know they're doing it, they are going into a pot which is basically being used to judge that brand.
Yeah.
And if there's things missing or there's inconsistencies, that's going to point to lack of trust, and
Yeah.
therefore that they'll leave and look at another brand that perhaps isn't doing that.
Yeah.
One that has got their eggs in all in one basket, and they are sort of clued in as to what they need.
Yeah.
And I think you've had examples of doing this where brands have come to us, and you can see there's bits of things here, a bit of branding there, some sort of half color palette's been created, social media's a mess.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, that's kind of what I describe as reactive messaging, reactive branding. They need something quickly, they do it, it fills the space, they move on.
Yeah.
But what we're all about is kind of creating that proactive branding of saying, let's sit down and work out what you need to be saying,
Yeah.
and let's make sure everything you do is on track
Yeah,
with that.
exactly that.
And I think it's not rocket science, but it's something that very quickly can be sloppy or missed.
Yeah.
And it only, like you say, it only takes in this day and age something on social media to start lapsing.
Yeah.
And suddenly all the rest of the brand is dragged down because that little piece of the interaction they've got with their customers is just not working.
Yeah.
It's making them look bad.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I mean, it is, yes, we're not kind of like land grabbers. We don't say to any of our clients that, everything needs to be done by us.
Of course not, no.
And, we purposely set out more often than not, creating brand guidelines for a client, and even setting up like templates and things for clients. And most recently, creating the templates maybe in Canva or similar systems that they can then take on and use. But we are like the brand guardians, if you like. The clients that work with us and work with us well, we are still overseeing like the creative output that they're putting out there.
Yeah, the important elements.
And
top
if
level.
we feel that things are changing in a wrong way, then we're quite honest to point that out.
Yeah.
So, we do encourage clients to do their own stuff. But when it comes to branding and setting the stall out, especially for a new brand or one that wants to reposition themselves, that's where they need expert help.
Agree.
Because we've been there, done that, and we've got the experience and the knowledge and the capability to do that because we've done it so many times before.
Completely
I mean,
agree.
I've been in the industry for about 30 years, so I've worked with brands that are big global brands, the likes of Princess Yachts and Mazda and Honda and Subway and PepsiCo and you name it.
Yeah.
So
Big brands, yeah.
I've worked with those brands, and I may not have done all the initial brand work for some of those brands, but I've certainly been involved with helping to tell that story.
Yeah, aligning with the values. Yeah.
In a very professional way.
Yeah.
And I think that the second that starts to dip, I think that's where the problems start, really. And then your tribe, as we've mentioned before, they'll start looking at another tribe.
Yeah, they will.
Yeah. They won't believe in you as a business or a brand.
No.
So, it's important to just keep tabs on how your brand looks, whether they're targeting the messaging, the narrative, the creative, everything about your business, internally and externally, is being done correctly. Yeah. So, and that's what 100%. We are. We're brand guardians, really, for all our clients.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you're right with regards to, we're not precious about wanting to do everything ourselves, but we are very passionate about maintaining a level of consistency and quality. And if we feel there's going to be a compromise in that across anything we do by bringing something in-house or giving somebody the task of something that they're not trained or experienced in, then of course we're going to voice the concern, because that is an area where that brand consistency could lapse.
Yep.
And I think it is purely based on that and not based on whether we want the work or not. It's never been about that. It's only ever been about
absolutely
what's going to happen to the client if that happens.
And
I think that's the controversy with something like Canva. A trained designer could use a tool like Canva and understand the principles still and apply them. And it wouldn't necessarily mean that Canva's a useless tool, but the marketing angle of Canva is so much more focused on let's get non-designers designing and let's get people that aren't familiar with design packages using things like Canva to try and fill that gap. And I think that's where the issue occurs. Certainly from our point of view, and that barrier that we need to break with clients. But obviously, other than that, I think everything else you've said is pretty much
Yeah.
spot on.
And I think, you know, we're great advocates. Like, we'll openly talk to clients that, you know, we consistently say to a lot of our clients that whatever we're charging, right? And if it's a, you know, large branding project, it is going to be, you know, tens of thousands.
Of course it is,
more often than not.
Yeah.
But it's an investment,
Yeah.
right? And it's not to be seen as a cost ever.
No.
Because we set your stall out in the right way, your target audience will buy into you,
Yeah.
and talk to other like-minded people that might want to buy into your brand as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And either, you know, buy into your services or buy into your products or both. So we always say, you know, you need to treat this, and whatever we do actually for our business, not just on branding, but it could be a website, it could be, you know, a marketing plan.
Agreed.
We always say that it's an investment.
Yes.
It should never ever be seen as a cost.
No.
You know, and I think the second you start seeing it as a cost,
You're looking at it wrong. Yeah.
then, you know, you could be using the wrong agency because they're not telling you things in the correct way.
That's true. Yeah.
And they're not talking to you about the brand and the tribe and
Strategy.
the messaging
yeah.
and the strategy that you need in order to help grow your business.
Absolutely.
Then yes, you could be using the wrong company.
Yeah.
But equally, you could, just basically be, you know, trying to do too many things yourself.
Yes.
And not setting your stall up in the correct manner,
Agreed.
which is ultimately detrimental to you financially.
Yeah.
You know, you might be saving, I don't know, $5,000 if you went to, say, a freelancer. I'm not dissing freelancers by any means,
Sure.
but they may not have the scope and the experience that, you know, using an agency such as us has.
Yeah.
And therefore may not be able to advise the client in the correct way.
Agreed.
So ultimately, yes, you might be saving money,
Yeah.
but is it setting your business up in the correct way? I'd argue
Exactly.
not.
Yeah. No, you're right.
And, you know, any one of us could work as a freelancer, but we choose not to because collectively as an agency, we are much stronger, and not just stronger in terms of capability and showcasing and, you know, being able to tell our clients what we can deliver for them, but knowledge,
Yeah.
you know, and experience.
Yeah. Agreed.
You know, you can't just have that overnight. It takes time, and the collective knowledge and experience that we've got in our agency,
Yeah.
we are confident that when we're advising clients, it is, as I said, you know, a return on investment for them.
Has to be.
And
Absolutely,
it's
has to
money
be.
well spent.
Yeah. It has to be. I think you're right with regards to misconceptions between should I use a freelancer, should I use an agency. I don't think the divide is that clear cut in the sense for a lot of people because they don't understand the importance of one over the other, the value of one over the other. And I think it's that the thing that's lacking, like you say, is that with the agency view, we are, even if we're not experts in everything that the agency offers, we are involved with everything that one of us will do or the other does, and we cross talk and we learn from each other. And I think that combined knowledge means that every client that comes to us, the objective is always the same, and it's always that we want to give them the best thing we can give them, and go right back to the start and say, what are you trying to do this for, and what's the purpose of it? And I think that's the key thing, whereas say a freelancer would be much more reactive to, oh, you've asked me to do you a logo, you've asked me to do you a website, of course I can complete that task, here it is completed. But that's not what that business needs. And I think we're not afraid to kind of go back a step and say, is that actually what you need for your brand? Does your brand need that, and what are you trying to achieve? And I think that's, for me, that's one of the clear differences between what we would offer over a freelance or even a lesser agency, because I think any agency could compete with us if they wanted to, but it's that lack of where is their head at. And like we were saying, our clients are our audience, they're our tribe, if you like. So if we want them to do well with their business, we have to expect that we're treating them in the same way with our business. And I think for me that's the difference. It's not so much the tasks, it's the objectives and the
that's a good point actually, that we treat our clients in a way that sets our stall out about our brand as white space.
Exactly that.
And if they believe in us, then hopefully that attracts other like-minded clients that
Yeah.
buy into our narrative as well, I guess.
Yeah, exactly that.
So
And like you say, we're not always going to be the cheapest, but if you're always coming at us with budget in mind and how
Yeah.
cheap can this be and how cheap can that be, you're not looking at it the right way. Because if you value yourself and your own business,
Yeah.
you've got to put a price on that value, and
Yeah.
we can help you scale that or improve that. But we can't help you if you're so low in the budget spectrum of what you think your business is worth.
Yeah.
And you come to us with that mindset.
Yeah.
It's very difficult for us to then help you when that ambition in your own mind is not there to grow
Yeah.
your business.
Yeah, that's true. It's very
And
true.
obviously we're reactive to that person's ambition, and if it's not there,
Yeah.
we can't create it for them. We can't say to them, we'll take over your business and we'll run it.
Yeah.
We can only enhance what they're trying to do.
Yeah, nor would we want to.
Nor would we want to half the time. No, exactly that.
Although I wouldn't mind taking over a brewery.
That would be quite nice. Yeah, that would be good fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, I mean, that trust thing is certainly, it's a key word really, that, the clients that we work extremely well with
Yeah,
are ones that trust us implicitly
agreed.
to guide them,
Yeah.
and we are, as I said earlier, that we're very open,
Yes.
that, we will advise. Ultimately, it's up to a client whether they want to take that advice or not, and some do,
course.
some don't.
Yeah,
But certainly the ones that do
yeah,
tend to prosper.
yeah.
And we've helped to elevate a whole number of brands,
Sure have. Yeah.
because we've got that very down to earth, honest, open, trustworthy approach
Absolutely.
with our clients.
Yeah.
And I think that's put us in good stead and gone a long way with a lot of clients. And the ones, as I say, that do trust us, we've exponentially helped to grow their business.
Yeah, completely
So-
agree. Behind every brand there's a person. It's the people, like you've already said many times now, that it's the people that grow the brand, that drive the brand.
Yeah.
And I think we always see everyone we work with as the people and not the size and not the brand, not the company.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
company scale is kind of irrelevant. Yes, it helps us a lot because if somebody says to us, we're of X size already, we want to grow it, we've got lots of budget,
Yeah.
lots of capacity to grow. Obviously that's exciting for us because that's a lot of stuff we can do and get involved with.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we are still looking at them from the same point of view as we would be from a much smaller brand as to, who are your audience, who are you, what are you about, and where's the passion in your brand
Yeah.
that we can tap into and market for you.
Yeah.
And I think that is the crucial thing for me is, we're enhancing the brands that come to us,
Yeah.
but we can't
Yeah, we are.
recreate them.
Yeah.
We can't make them something they're not,
No.
because it's got to come from the person that's running the businesses or the brand itself
Yeah, that's a key point,
to
actually.
drive it.
Yeah, we can set up all the messaging and all the tone of voice that we feel is right for your business, but ultimately, you as a client need to be the ones to run with it.
Exactly.
And if at any point along that road you falter and you change the narrative, then it's doomed to fail.
It's very doomed to fail. I think you've been, and both of us have been in scenarios where we've tried to, give brands and businesses a leg up, and we've pitched them at a much higher point than perhaps they were at to try and give them that boost to move forward. But if the business itself or the brand itself is just not aligned with that boost we're trying to give them,
Yeah.
it's the disconnect, and it's just doomed to fail basically. That you
Yeah.
can't do that for them unless they're ready to do that
Yeah.
for themselves.
Yeah, so true.
And sometimes, we've been a victim of that. This is where we can see you. This is where you should be.
Yep.
Let's make you there now. But we've almost dragged them into that higher stance.
Yeah.
And they're not ready for it.
Well, sometimes they're not ready for it or not willing to stump up the cost in
more
order to
often
get
than
there.
not, it's probably the latter.
And
yeah.
we get that. I mean,
Yeah.
we can and do work in stages with some clients.
Sure.
That, to do a complete rebrand, and especially if they're a large organisation, they've got to change literally everything.
Of course, yeah. Big
You
ask.
can't do that overnight.
No.
So we normally work with clients on that basis, in that scenario,
Yeah.
where we phase the old brand style and our own brand narrative, if you
Yeah,
like,
that makes
over,
sense.
say, 2 to 3 years. Purely because we know that some clients, they don't have the budget to change
don't,
all
no.
the brand collateral overnight.
No.
It's not feasible.
No, it's not practical, and they're afraid that the people that have been exposed to it, or their customers, their tribe, suddenly see a change and a shift, and it's
Yeah.
going to throw them, in with the sharks. But actually, we're saying to them, no, that there can be a staggered approach.
Yeah.
And all the big brands, you know, are a victim of that. They're going to have to do a staggered approach.
Yeah.
At the risk of just suddenly showing someone something they've never seen before.
Yeah.
So I think, that's a really good point, is to bear that in mind, that, you know, there are ways of doing things that aren't just on off.
Yeah.
There's staggered approaches. There's gentle ways of, you know, releasing things on social media, anticipating a change, teasing a change, and doing it in a very clever way.
Yeah.
So it's not just who are these guys? I don't recognise them anymore.
I think that's the advantage. I mean, having a teaser type campaign, look what's coming soon kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, your tribe buys into that. Oh, I'm excited. What's coming next? Kind of thing. So if they've already bought into your business and into your messaging, your narrative, then you know, surely they should be the ones most excited about what's coming next.
Yes,
you know?
You're building that momentum up for them. You're creating that anticipation, and they love it.
Yeah.
And it shows them that you're doing things. You're concerned about your brand and your branding. It's not just stale for you. It's something you're always thinking about.
Yeah.
And I think that can be a really positive thing for a lot of people, certainly for longer serving brands, like we mentioned with Apple, you know, slightly changing their logo, not reinventing it, but just updating it a little bit. But it just gives the nod to their tribe, if you like, and their fan base, that they are aware of it, they are changing, and it's not stale. Although they could just keep the same, and they primarily have kept the same shape, without doing anything to it. You run the risk of kind of people judging you and thinking, well, you know, you haven't changed that in so long. Does that mean the brand is kind of a bit behind as well? And I think, although it's got no relevance, people will think like that. And I think it's important that you keep refreshing.
Yeah, that's true.
That image of yourself. But not losing your core values, because I think, like you said, with Apple, you know, there's those core values have always been there. They've never lost them.
Yeah, I mean, their core values have always been like innovative. For one. Creative, and cool. You know, so those three elements together, and they've always pushed that narrative. Always. So I mean, I dealt with Apple products, you know, when I first started out in the industry, where an Apple Mac would cost like, I don't know, 20 grand. It was ridiculous money. And now, you know, we've got devices, you know, from Apple. Yes, okay, they may not be as innovative as they were when, say, Steve Jobs was around.
Sure.
But they're certainly still seen as cool products. They work well. They're innovative in terms of some of the technology that's in them. But they're also, you know, they're seen as creative tools. You know, whether it's music or it's, you know, video or whatever you're into. You know, people buy like MacBooks and stuff because, you know, yes, the product looks cool, it works well, but they're creative-minded individuals. Really. And I think that's where, like, the story and the sort of messaging and the branding of Apple, they've always, you know, shouted about that, all those elements. Really,
they have. They have.
And that's not stopped since day one when they were initially founded to where we are today.
No, not at all.
So yes, like you say, you can still beat the same drum and have the same message, but you still need to, say, creatively, I guess, evolve.
You do.
To show that you are moving with the times and all the rest of it. So I
think that's a really interesting point. You know, going back to what you first said about branding, this misconception between it being your identity, your logo, what people see as you. Because I think that consistency also builds a huge amount of trust, because it's shown somebody that, in essence, Apple were confident enough to come up with the logo quite early on and stick with it, and they've managed to maintain it and see it through all this time. So it builds that really strong, similar to, you know, Nike, Adidas, other brands like that. It portrays a very strong brand image, because it's showing somebody, look how long we've been, you know, we're confident enough to come up with this in the beginning, look how long we've managed to run with it, and look how adaptive we've been to the different markets. And as you say, when I was at school, they were very much a creative tool only for creatives. You know, if you're into music or arts or whatever, an Apple Mac was great. But it was very much segregated off into that market. And I think what, you know, Steve Jobs' ambition was to do that, was to make it for the masses, make it for everyone, which is very clever, given that they're seen and pigeonholed as a creative tool, to then open that up into a market gradually. by subtly building trust and building reputation up through expansion. And I think that can show the growth of a brand really well. Were they to change the logo, it would make people question and think, well, have they lost confidence in what they had? Was that logo somehow not representing them anymore? Have they changed? So I think that's a really good example of how a motif or a logo can also be quite poignant in judging your brand.
I mean, that's a good point, actually. I mean, because the Apple brand in particular, I mean, it's created such a tribe of followers that me and Advocate all being one.
Same. But guilty.
Yeah, and because it works generally, is why I love Apple, and I think their products are cool. But I've bought into that narrative. But over the years, I mean, Apple have basically created such an iconic brand that like-minded people that see other people like buying Apple products, I'm not saying necessarily now, but certainly 20 years ago, buying Apple products, they're seen like, oh, they've got an Apple product, they're cool, they're cool people. I want to be part of that tribe. They're buying into a cool brand because of the way it's been marketed, because of the narrative that's been put forward.
Yeah.
So people want to buy into that thing. Whereas now, like, I guess Apple's biggest rival is Samsung. And most of the people I know that are buying Samsung because they hate Apple. Not because Samsung is a cool product.
Yeah, almost a boycott and not buy Apple.
But purely, and there's been a study, an MRI study actually, that went through the same process. And they actually concluded that people buying Apple products are buying them because they're cool and they're creative and it makes them feel good. And they don't care about Samsung. Samsung, they know, are producing great products, probably better products, in fact.
At the times, for sure, they are.
Whereas Samsung customers, I guess, are buying Samsung stuff because they hate Apple. The drive is that
it's an interesting
strong
dichotomy, isn't it? Between
they don't want to be in the Apple tribe, if you like, so they're anti-Apple.
Yeah.
And purposely want to buy a Samsung
it's an interesting
product.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept because you almost everything we've been saying about building the relationship with your customers and building trust and building the right brand almost doesn't apply in that instance because they're buying into a brand not because of any of those things, but purely based on the fact they don't want to buy into another brand. Which is really interesting.
Yeah.
If the brand ethos as well, which is what we touched on, if a brand comes across as not sustainable, or they do something controversial in the news, like a large oil firm does something controversial in part of the world, and it upsets everyone overnight, everything that brand's associated with can become boycotted, and suddenly people don't want to buy into anything that they're part of because they've tarnished the trust. Yeah, that trust, like you say, with people that have loved the brand for so long, is also quite delicate. And they always say, love-hate are quite closely related, but you could end up going from loving an Apple product for so many years. If it was to let you down, on a few occasions, that could be all it would take for you to then suddenly start.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's certain things that I think Apple don't do very well.
Sure, I know. Yeah, we're sounding very biased.
Stupid mouse with a blooming charger thing underneath.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
So you can't use it whilst it's charging up. What's that about?
They still refuse to change it. So, obviously we're sounding like we're the biggest fanboys of Apple, but that's not the case. As you say, we have used the products, they don't let us down, and we are in a creative industry, so we're probably a bit biased with them because we use them for that. Appreciate, for our needs, they do fulfill a lot of the purposes we need. But I think you're right, and it's just that remembrance that were they to release something that was a big letdown, that could seriously affect how we move forward with their products in the creative industry. And I think that's something they've always got to adhere to. And it's a difficult thing to keep up over many years.
Well, I mean, this harks back to a lot I was saying about like brands. The ones that stand out are the innovators.
Yes.
Like Dyson, for instance, came out and revolutionised the vacuum cleaner really. So there's products and brands out there that are innovators. Like with Apple now and Samsung, I mean, the lines are blurred, really.
Yeah, they are blurred,
they're creating products, even the way they're marketing and even the way they brand themselves. You close your eyes, sometimes you don't know which brand you're looking at.
No, you don't.
And I think, it's certainly a case that Samsung seems to be following what Apple has done.
Yeah.
but that's no bad thing, and we see that happen time and time
Across
again
all types
with
of brands, yeah.
loads of brands.
Clothing brands, for example, copy each other.
But one thing I touching on like brands that do differentiate, like most recently, like if you look at Coca-Cola, for instance, there's still that warm, fuzzy feeling, the holidays are coming and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And I certainly see Coke as sort of being that, used to be the kind of forefront brand, if you like, of being sort of cutting edge and trying to do things differently and all the rest of it. Whereas now you see the likes of Pepsi, for instance, a lot of sort of 2D graphics and using a lot of youth, really younger people in the marketing products and stuff, and using rap tracks and things like that.
Yeah, I've noticed that too.
So I guess what they're trying to do now is get like the younger generation on board with their brand.
Yeah.
Right. To then, as they go into their 30s, 40s, have their own kids and so on, their kids are going to buy into Pepsi because their parents did.
Yeah.
And it's seen as cool.
Yeah.
Whereas I think, Coca-Cola has basically steadfastly stayed in the middle lane.
It has.
They've not sort of been controversial in any way.
Just in the background.
They've not been edgy.
No.
They kind of just stayed in the safe zone.
And that's worked for them quite well, I think.
Yeah. So I don't think you like a brand like that, you can't hate or love or truly love what they've done.
No.
But you just feel, they've done a nice job. Always have.
Yeah.
And
Safe,
whereas
but not
Pepsi,
risk
I think
takers.
you could, is a bit Marmitey, some of the sort of brand style and some of the edginess.
Yeah.
Yes, they might alienate some Coca-Cola customers, but they probably don't care because, they've purposely gone after the younger audience to get them on board. And as we well know, it's so hard trying to get somebody on board with your brand. But once they're on board, providing you maintain that consistency of doing everything properly, you should retain them.
Yeah, you should.
So I think they've done a good job.
I think you're right. It's the combination between, like going back again, not to keep banging on about Apple, but going back to what you said with Steve Jobs. I think like we were speaking about earlier about the brand being the people. I think he was the person that drove Apple. Without him, I would seriously question whether Apple would be anywhere near where it is today.
Oh, no, definitely.
He was that person that had that vision, and I think, like you say, there's the blurred lines of today are in part due to the technology, but also in part due to that visionary needing to be there to drive that business forward. I think from day one, when he set up in his garage, he had that impression of, I know where I'm going to be, and I'm not going to stop until I get there. And I think that's what's pulling, regardless of what, like we've been saying, regardless of who we're working with or the clients we're working with, if you've got somebody behind the wheel that's got that much drive, then it's a pleasure to assist them and help them and work with them. Because they're the ones that are doing that movement. The minute that momentum's lost, then it's just another brand. Which I think, as much as Tim Cook's doing a good job, and the people that have kind of smoothed Apple out since Steve's gone have done a good job. I think it's very clear to see
Tim Cook.
Well, exactly, It's very clear to see, unfortunately, when he did go, the change in the brand, I think, and people's excitement with it and engagement with it did change with him, because you bought into him as well as Apple.
Yeah, that's very true.
And when he's gone, there is something missing from Apple that you can't put back in.
Well, people can be the brand, the face of the brand.
They very much can,
and more so in this day and age, I think.
Yeah.
People are brands themselves.
Exactly.
So, times have changed.
They have. And
evolved.
I think you've touched really well on a Coca-Cola, because, something like that, you don't necessarily expect a person, and you almost wouldn't want a person behind that brand, but instead you'd use the culture, and you'd bring the culture into the branding of what kind of person is the product for. And that's their focus, that's their brand. You almost don't need to know who's behind the product, providing you see the product being enjoyed by the person you align yourself to. And I think that's really, really important and poignant. And just touching back on what we said about with Apple, with the age, you start seeing the older adverts coming back as well. So the older Coke adverts, the older Pepsi adverts, to prove to the younger generation, look how long we've been around, look at where we used to be.
Well, they're only around so I can remember them.
Well, just to touch base with all the adults of the world that are trying to think, oh yeah, I remember that. But it creates, I think it subtly creates that longevity of trust because, you know, the younger generation are watching something that's quite vintage. Okay, so what are the first steps in building a brand?
Honestly, my recommendation, I know we're biased, but working with an agency.
Yeah.
I think, you know, they've got the background, they've got the knowledge, experience, and know-how of how to tell the right message to your target audience. And you may not even know who your target audience is.
Very likely not.
You know, we can help you to define that. And narrow that down and make sure that your messaging and your narrative is right for that target audience.
Sure.
So, yeah, I'd say where possible, obviously use, you know, a brand agency such as ours. It can certainly help with that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think starting off on the right foot is crucial. And as you said, experience is mandatory really with starting a brand off. Obviously, you can do one yourself, but it's all the other stuff around it that we've already touched on, and the overarching structure and the strategy is going to be missed if you do that, I think. And then obviously asking yourself the main questions of who you are, what you do, and why does what you do matter?
Yeah.
Which I think is again touching on what we said before, but often overlooked if you're trying to do something yourself and you've not got experience with working with other brands and you've not got much knowledge or sort of overarching awareness of your industry, then it's very difficult for you to create a brand that's going to stand out and going to have any impact if that's been overlooked.
Yeah, I mean, the point of difference, I think that's like a crucial, like the third question really is why are you different?
Yeah, 100%.
You know, you need to kind of, and that's where, you know, we can help with that is, you know, get that element right, that unless you can identify why you're different to your competitors.
Yeah.
And even if you're not wholly different, it's whether you can tell your story in a different way that creates that trust and that belief in your target audience. So they believe in you really as a brand.
Yeah.
So, because sometimes it is difficult. You know, we find this in our industry that, you know, we do a lot of the same things that a lot of our competitors do, but it's telling a story to our target audience of how we do it, and, you know, the whole return on investment and doing things in the right way, being open, honest, with our approach with our clients and giving them best practice and best advice. I think, you know, hopefully helps us to kind of stand out with our competitors.
I think you're spot on. I think the difference in what you're saying there is, you know, you can offer the same service to someone else on paper, but actually there, if you dig deep, there is things that everyone's doing different from one another. We would approach a branding project in a more perhaps personal, in-depth way. You'd come at it from different research. You work with a lot of brands yourself, a lot of big brands.
Yeah.
So that's an advantage we'd have over any other agency that hasn't got that.
Yeah.
We've got that, you know, that as we've said before, we've got the smaller team advantage. We've got the mixed discipline advantage. So where we're coming at it from is a very different place to all the other agencies out there, which again, on paper, they offer the same thing, but in practice, they don't work in the same way. And I think, like you've just said, communicating that to your audience is vital, or how are they going to know?
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, one of the things that, you know, if I want to give sort of a really good piece of advice of, you know, how to sort of create a brand, is making your brand personable. Mm-hmm. In this day and age, like in the old days, it used to be that you create a brand and you would put collateral out there into the world. So it might be a billboard ad, it might be a TV ad.
Yeah.
But there are very few ways of getting feedback from your target audience of how well your brand is being perceived.
No doubt, yeah.
Well, now,
There's
every
too
man
many
and his
ways.
dog
Yeah.
has a view of your brand,
They sure
good or
do.
bad.
Yeah.
So that whole shift, that mindset shift now, and the ability to communicate and collaborate with the brand is grown exponentially and will continue to grow.
Agreed.
So having that ability to come across as a very sort of personable brand, like I get you, my target audience, I really do get you.
Yeah.
This is what we believe you stand for.
Yeah.
So we are aligning to your values.
Agreed.
I think, that whole cyclical thing, that if you put your messaging out in the right way, your target audience will respond in the way that you expect them to, hopefully.
Hopefully.
And then that helps to really build that brand, that cycle. The more they engage with you, the more positive things they say about you, the more you can do of that type of thing,
Yeah.
to help elevate your brand.
Yeah.
So it's definitely another
Yeah.
crucial area.
Makes perfect sense.
So, yeah, I think we touched on one of these things before about like being like a generalist or a specialist. If you can be a specialist, for sure, you're going to stand out.
Yeah.
Right? It stands to reason because you got something.
Everyone else hasn't.
That your competitors might not.
Yeah.
So, and even if you are a generalist, it's still better to try and talk about like 2 or 3 maybe aspects of your business, so that you do get to be known for those specific things. So not to say that you're all things to all men and you don't do anything particularly well.
No, of course not. No.
So yeah, definitely try and specialize in just, certain areas, even if you do a full remit of services or products.
Yeah. No, you're right. People
so I
have to appreciate that, you can't stretching yourself too thin as well as a possible, area of concern for a potential new client. So I think knowing that you are a specialist in certain things, or you're dedicated to something, fills them with confidence to know that you're the people for the job, you're the right people for that specific task. You start trying to stretch yourself too thin and they kind of think, well, I might go to a specialist for that because I'm not confident enough that you're as good as they would be in that industry. And I think that's a really good thing, because you can end up, your brand can end up getting 3 or 4 times more customers of that, that desire, that specialism you've got, rather than you trying to just water yourself down and get, everything that's coming your way. And I think that's a really good point, I think.
Yeah, so, several other things that to bear in mind is like having the ability to have a brand name, which helps, that is easy to pronounce.
Yes.
It's short and memorable. So if you got a name that's, several words, and several of which have got numerous syllables in, then, it just takes you long to say it and pronounce it.
Yeah.
That doesn't help your brand.
No, not at all.
So yeah, if you're starting out with a new business and come up with a new name for a brand, we would certainly recommend trying to, come up with something that is easy to pronounce, is short and pithy, and becomes memorable, really.
Agreed.
Some of the
100%.
biggest brands, like we touched on earlier, like with Apple and Samsung and, brands like that are easy to say. Brands like that also globally, they're, people can say it in most different languages as well.
That's a very good point. Yeah, you don't want a language issue with something that's quite bespoke to a certain country.
No.
Unless it's a quirk to the brand that you want to emphasise the brand is from.
Some brands do.
Some brands do, yeah. If, you've got a nod to something from Sweden, you might want a quirky Swedish name. But it's that, generally, like you say, it needs to be something like that's
Volvo.
Like Volvo, even IKEA. I mean, it's very simple, but it works.
Yeah.
And I think, there's that definite issue with depending how far you want to go with your brand, you need to consider the audience, and if they are speaking on native language, if you ever did scale up, you've got you shot yourself in the foot a bit with creating a complex name to begin with that you've then got to try and shew across other countries.
And we see it in some of the clients that we've been involved with over the years, that sometimes they end up changing their company name. Because the existing name just doesn't really work for their brand and where they want to take the business. And we're admirable of people that have that ability and that vision to realize that it's not right for them moving forward. So if you're on that growth phase, you really need to look at what you're doing, or what your company name is, what your brand stands for, and is it right in this moment in time for you to then progress moving forward.
Exactly.
If it's not, then that's when, it needs to be addressed.
Yeah,
And
agreed.
again, we can certainly help with that.
Yeah.
One of the other key points is it protectable?
Mm-hmm.
So, we touched on at the very beginning of the other sector was about it being trademarked, right?
Yes,
So
yeah.
especially with a logo device, of whether it's a word mark or it's a symbol or whatever it is,
Yeah.
can it be trademarked? Because, a trademarked logo, for instance, or a name, that is an asset to the business. And
It is.
if you grow, especially like some of these global brands, they're worth billions of
Yeah.
pounds. So making sure that your name, your brand, can be trademarked, it can be protected in some way.
Yeah.
And that's really crucial. Now, that is a service that we do, offer. We work with a local law firm, so we can trademark company logos and stuff.
Sure.
And we can offer advice in those areas. So that's something we can certainly help with.
Yeah.
And created brands for loads of our clients and logos.
Yeah.
So yeah, if that's something that you need help with, we can certainly help.
Yeah. No, it's something really important, I think, for a lot of brands. One of the brands we worked with before, Reef Cubes, they registered that as a trademark.
Yeah.
And I think that was a great thing to do for their brand at the right time and make sure nobody else can take that name.
Yeah.
And it's become quite an iconic part of the business that that we're working with them, and they're trying to kind of go global now with that and sort of take over a lot more of the sort of market of what they've created.
Yeah.
And I think if it wasn't registered at an early point,
Yeah.
that would have caused them a lot of hassle.
Yeah.
And again, that was something that we were tasked to brand for them, and we were very passionate about, and we put forward to them that that's really worth protecting quite early on.
Yeah.
And creating a logo that's timeless for them as well, and creating something that's more a hybrid of science and friendliness in one, but showing them that concept behind everything. So we're showing them, not just giving them a logo, which I think touching back on what we've asked here and what are the steps of building a brand, I think there's also a really crucial point of, if you are doing your logo, to be very mindful of how everything sits together with it from our point of view. So creatively, how the font aligns itself. Is the logo friendly? Is it soft? Is it sharp? What's your audience expecting? You don't want to pair a sharp kind of old-fashioned font with a modern-looking motif, let's say. So that's something that, again, we've got a lot of experience with. And if someone's doing that themselves, we see it time and time again. They've just not done that. They've not gone through the process. It doesn't work.
No, there's a disconnect.
There's a very clear disconnect. And the spacing and the conceptualizing and the mathematics, if you like, which is involved quite often in a symmetrical logo or a perfectly aligned logo. Once you communicate that to the client of, this is the trouble we've gone to do that, I think, again, that adds so much more value for them to that motif than just something, this is something we've created, here's the end product. But they don't really know the concept and the thought behind it. So I think with Reef Cubes, for example, touching on your registering and the trademark point, I think they did that all collectively all very well. And that's a great example from our point of view.
I mean, we've protected, I've some clients like Princess Yachts, for instance, in the past. We've protected, like we came up with slogans like Dare to Dream and Travel at the Speed of Life
nice.
and stuff like that. And there was one that I kind of threw in there for Stiga lawnmowers as well years ago. And which was mulch better mowers, because they got mulching lawnmowers.
Good. Like it.
And I just threw it in there almost like as a throwaway kind of strapline, really.
Simple and effective.
But they loved it. And so they registered that as well. So you can register not just the logos or trademark the logos. You can do straplines as well to protect that. You might only want to protect it for the longevity of a campaign, for instance. But you can protect it longer if you wish. It's certainly having something like that. Assets within your business that are protectable are assets. They have value to your business.
Absolutely.
Protecting it, I think, is really crucial.
It's crucial. Anything. You're right. Anything that adds value, I think, is worth protecting.
We touched on this earlier as well about innovation. If you can innovate and have something that your competitors don't have,
of course,
then in order to create a brand, if you like, you've got a much stronger message if you're an innovator.
Yeah.
Because already the narrative is that you've got something that people don't have, so you're driving demand right from the get-go.
Yeah.
Innovation is a key
Absolutely
area.
agree. Yeah.
Packaging. I mean, that's another thing. Like if your touch point, some customers, they might have a business where mainly they're selling product. So if their product is, packaging, or it's packaged in some way, it's just making sure that packaging says what they need it to say in the right way, tone of voice, order of information is apparent as well. So, reading top to bottom, left to right.
Yeah.
Or left to right, top to bottom.
Whichever way around you want to do it, yeah.
Yeah. That order of information, the key points you want to try and get across. So packaging can be really important as well.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dialogue. We touched on this earlier. Having a dialogue with your target audience, that's more apparent now than ever before.
Yeah.
Where you got that 360 element, you're portraying what you want to say and your ethos and what your brand stands for.
Mm-hmm.
But having your target audience, relate to that and respond to that.
Yeah.
Normally on socials or other platforms, and help building that narrative and that brand. And they are your biggest advocates. They can tell your story for you. Yeah. And help continue that momentum.
It's very true. Yeah. The world we live in, that's.
So I think that's important.
It is, yeah.
Research we touched on earlier. So ensuring that, you conduct research. It might be like we touched on with some of our clients and just doing it might be small qualitative research where, you're just finding out about the perception of your business if it's an established existing business, just seeing what the perception is, because your internal perception might be quite different.
It might be. Very, very likely, in fact.
So changing that narrative as well and ensuring that your research helps drive change.
Yeah.
Because it's pointless, conducting research. Well, having said that, I mean, the research might be that, you're conducting that they might reinforce that your messaging and your narrative is absolutely bob on.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
True.
And if that
it might confirm that what you've got is spot on. Yeah.
Yeah. But in some cases, as we highlighted earlier, it's not.
No. And usually, I would say, there's definitely things that would come about from that and be brought to light.
Another important aspect is which we touched on earlier as well, is like that brand story internally.
Yes.
So it's making sure that your staff are basically on the same page.
100%.
So you've explained to them, especially if you're working with an agency, we can, work with companies with internal comms as well to try and, in some cases, create assets and stuff to portray what we're trying to achieve with the brand, the messaging that needs to go out there to the target audience at every touch point. It's them picking up the phone, it's them meeting people, it's emails that go out, it's everything. Literally every touch point needs to be on brand, really. Yeah. Same messaging, same narrative, getting the staff buy-in. If they buy into what you're trying to achieve, then, quite often they're also your biggest advocates as well.
They are.
Talking to friends, family, and about the business, other people buy into that narrative.
Mm-hmm.
It's key.
100% agree. Yeah.
What else? Don't leave your brand vulnerable. Rob touched on this element earlier. So, you can set out your stall to have the right messaging, the best creative, the best strategy, all that. Your target audience, your tribe is bought into all that.
Yeah.
But if then, things start to suffer, like, we were talking earlier about the creative starts suffering. You start bringing everything in house,
Yeah.
and it's not the same quality level of creative that your agency potentially has been doing it.
No.
Or you start using, in this day and age, ChatGPT, for instance, spelling, grammar errors, and just customer service. If that starts to dip in any way, clients start making complaints. You don't get back to them in time.
Yeah.
All these things,
Yeah.
right, either individually or collectively, will harm the brand.
100%.
So make sure that when you're setting your brand stall out, that you have all your ducks in a row, and make sure that you're not going to be vulnerable to any of those issues, really.
Yeah,
Any of those
you're
problems.
100% right. Yeah, and I think too many brands these days, AI is making a big impact on the world, and I don't doubt it's going to be extremely impressive. We're using it already in things we're doing, and I think there's an element and a use for it, but you've got to be very careful, as you say, relying and trusting on it to say take over your whole narrative or your whole copywriting for your brand, and expect it to create content and be as authentic and personable with that content as you would be as a person for your brand, because it is only a bot. It is only an artificially intelligent system. It's not going to talk like you would talk to a human from your brand, and you have to appreciate that. Is that something you want your customer or consumer reading? Something that you produce from that's not coming from you. And
that's a good point, actually. I mean, you touched on just verbatim using ChatGPT, for instance, but we've seen it where people who have created copy for websites, for instance, and then we know that Google penalizes brands and companies for their website copy if it's just spewed out directly from ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So yes, by all means use it as a tool.
Yeah.
But use it as a tool and adapt it and make it your own.
Yeah. It's an assistant.
Do not use it verbatim.
No.
Because it will penalise you.
It will penalise you. And like I say, the end user is reading it. And I've even got savvy with, I can tell when certain clauses or phrases have been written by a bot, because it uses the same repetitious strategies, or it uses like thesaurus-like descriptions. And I think that's not what a human would say.
Yeah.
And quite often, like we've been talking about, you go right back to what your consumer wants to hear. And very often it's just an authentic, down-to-earth, to-the-point statement. They don't want the fluffy kind of beating around the bush, all things, all men, all technology, all mechanics of what you're doing. They just want, what is it you're trying to sell me? What is it you're trying to offer? And how can I buy into that?
Yeah.
Almost like we're having a conversation now, and like we would if we spoke to a potential client, or they spoke to their potential client from their business.
Yeah.
That authenticity and honesty from the person is a strong selling point for any brand. And I think if they detect that there's something in between
that's very true.
where there's an artificial element, or it's not come from you, or you've not said it, immediately they're going to disconnect with it, because they think that's not come from you. I'm not interested in reading it.
Yeah, you're not a human.
No, exactly. Because you're reading about someone's brand, so you want to feel like you're talking to me. You haven't even got the importance put forward to actually want to talk to me. You've used a bot to talk to me, so I don't want to know.
Yeah.
And I think that, we have to be mindful of that. Certainly on social media, we're seeing it a lot, and people are so used to reading through things for such a long period of time that unless it's authentic and it grabs you, I think the more AI stuff on there, the less engaged people are going to become with social media.
That's true. The same with imagery. I mean, AI imagery, we can tell, because obviously we're immersed in the industry, but we can tell an AI image.
Yeah, we can. Off. And you disconnect from it.
Yeah, because it's almost ultra realistic.
Yeah.
So I would err on caution using AI. I mean, use it by all means.
It looks fantastic, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Use it as a tool, but don't use it verbatim.
No, I completely agree. Yeah.
So I mean, this leads on to the last point. Really, I'd say is that your creative needs to befit your brand.
Yes, definitely.
So, like we touched on earlier, that every touch point of your brand, the collateral, so whether it could be an email, it could be your promotional video, it could be your website, it could be whatever, social posts, the quality of which needs to be reflective of your brand and the narrative that you're trying to put out there. If, yes, you're saying that you're low quality, low cost, everything, then by all means, do everything yourself and make it look low budget and all the rest of it. But would that seriously do your business any good? I don't think so.
No.
So, yeah, I think, if you want to come across as a respected, trustworthy, honourable business, then all your creative collateral needs to reflect that. The second it starts to dip, then, what does that say about your business and your brand?
Yeah, I would agree.
It's not going to help in any way.
No, it's the bread and butter. And even, you've got businesses out there that focus on target on being budget and being low value and being cheap. But one thing they're not doing is neglecting the fact that they know that's their target audience, and everything else they've got in, as you say, their ducks are all in a row with everything else. So the brand style, the messaging, the tone of voice, it may look like it's neglected. It may look like it's kind of a little bit of an oversight in times. But they know what they're doing, and they have put the time into making sure that even if their target audience is low value and they do want to, kind of come across as like a cheap and cheerful brand, they've done it in the right way. And I think that's chalk and cheese from having a brand that you've neglected and you've not assessed that with. Because you just won't grow it.
No, that's right.
You'll be able to get by with it at times depending on the size of it, but you won't grow it.
No, you won't.
Certainly not in this day and age.
No. So, guys, that's it from us on the branding side of things. Look forward to the next episode coming soon. And just want to say a big shout out to, because we're using this space in this fantastic pub. It's a local pub to us. We're based in Kings Kerswell in Devon, it's a local pub to us called the Lord Nelson. Highly recommend it. Do some great beers. Great shout out to Lord Nelson for letting us use this space to do our pubcast, Brands on Tap.
Thanks for listening, guys, and hopefully we've covered all things branding in a comprehensive way, and you've found some bits useful. So
probably very comprehensive.
Probably too comprehensive.
Right, thanks, take care, guys.
Cheers.